And now on Radio Frontier, Michael McKay with the McKay Interview.
One of the most distinctive voices on BBC Radio, David Willey, has been the BBC's man in Rome and the Vatican for 42 years. He's known 5 popes and countless Italian prime ministers. And he's here with me this morning in the comfortable surroundings of the Hotel Beau Rivage to share with us his impressions, opinions and analysis of the fascinating country which is modern-day Italy, and also his opinions on what is for many the mysterious, enigmatic and even puzzling city-state which is the Vatican. David Willey, good morning.
Good morning.
And thanks for spending time with us today. My first question is so simple. You've lived in Rome for probably half of your professional life. Why do you love Rome?
Well, I fell in love with Rome when I was a student. I came to study Italian there in the 1950s, and I thought it was the most wonderful place I'd ever been in. In fact, my very first job took me to Rome. I was hired by Reuters news agency immediately on going down from Cambridge in 1956, and I found myself living the jet-set life in a Rome which is almost unrecognizable from today's eternal city because the traffic, the building, everything was at a much calmer pace. And it was much easier to see the beauties of Rome than under the current situation. The other day, for example, I was in the Vatican museums having a look at the restoration of the Raphael rooms, which they've been brought back to. They've been cleaned for the past 30 years, and finally the Vatican restorers are showing it off to the public. Well, guess what? You can barely move in these beautiful Raphael rooms. The crowds are so heavy. There's such pressure. It's hot. They can't install air conditioning because of the ancient walls. So people go to see the beauties of Rome, but they don't enjoy them in the same way that I was able to in the 1950s.
This must be a mixed blessing, though. On the one hand, the culture and the art of Rome is available now to so many more people, yet on the other hand,
yes,
it seems to militate against enjoyment.
For example, you go into the Sistine Chapel, and there are more than 1,000 people. There they have installed air conditioning, but still the noise level is such that it's difficult to contemplate Michelangelo's masterpiece creations without being distracted by the hubbub going on around you.
What's going on in Rome today? I mean, whether it's the politics of Rome in Italy or the unprecedented situation of having 2 popes in one Vatican. I mean, should what's going on in Italy be of concern to non-Italians, to non-Catholics, or people who just don't live there, or just mild curiosity?
Well, of course, Italy's been around a long time, and although I think you have to realise that although it's very ancient, it's also very modern in the sense that Italy was only united for the first time since the Roman Empire 150 years ago, and then it had to be recreated, as it were, after the Second World War and the fall of fascism. So it's a state which has really been rather politically weak in most of its recent history, despite the glories of ancient Rome.
But when you say, sorry to interrupt you, but when you say recreated after 1945, give a couple of examples of what that recreation actually meant.
Well, you had to have a working democracy because fascism had destroyed the Italian state. There was no freedom. You had the racial laws, for example, during fascism. Mussolini and Hitler were pals, although they were not perhaps as close as Mussolini portrayed them at the time. But Italy basically had to start all over from scratch. The destruction of the Second World War meant that its industrial base had to be restarted. And the 1960s, 50s and 60s were boom time. And they talked about the Italian miracle. You may remember.
Is it fair, or maybe even a naive question, to ask you what's holding back modern-day Italy?
Corruption. One word.
Corruption.
Corruption. Yeah. Terrible corruption.
So who really runs the place?
Well, when I say corruption, I won't be popular for saying this, but I feel that Silvio Berlusconi his regime, which has been operating in Italy for the past 2 decades, has, as it were, almost institutionalized corruption. Not that there wasn't corruption before Mr. Berlusconi, but Mr. Berlusconi has a very equivocal attitude to, you can see from the number of court cases to which he's subject, the number of times he's been tried on charges of tax fraud and of corruption. And political corruption has been one of the great problems of Italy today. So, for example, the health services, the hospitals in Rome they have a lot of equipment which is not working simply because regional and local government officers have put the money which has been paid by Italian taxpayers into their own pockets.
But others must be complicit in that. It can't be just one group.
Of course. The whole country has become complicitous.
So one last question, because time is always against us on these interviews. You've been watching the Vatican now for more than 40 years and have known 5 popes. What effect have the scandals within the Vatican had, such as the disgraceful behaviour of these paedophile priests, on the way the Vatican sees itself inside this sort of inner sanctum? And do you think that a Jesuit pope can do anything about it? It's a huge question, I know.
Huge question. Well, the Vatican is a bit of an anomaly, you know. It's a sovereign state. The Pope is a monarch, a bit of a medieval monarch in comparison with other modern democracies. But I think your question really is too complex to answer in one answer. All I can say is that the Roman Catholic Church today is facing an unprecedented series of challenges of credibility as a result of the paedophile priest crisis. It is suffering from a financial crisis because its income has diminished as a result of these scandals. The faithful are not contributing like they used to. The number of priestly vocations is falling. Religious vocations are falling. The Jesuits, for example, have lost about half their membership in recent decades. It's a very, very serious question. And although the number of priests in the world remains more or less static, most of the new priests are in the developing countries. So the old Catholic Europe is gradually being superseded by the new Catholic South, that's to say Latin America and Africa, and to a minor extent even to Asia. The church, as it's been known during most of modern history, is fading away, and a new church is going to come. Have we reached the tipping point? That's the interesting question now posed by the election of Pope Francis, who was a very different, not only the first ever Pope from Latin America, but a very different sort of leader of the Catholic Church to his immediate predecessors.
And one final question, not to be unfair to the new pontiff, but the fact that he chooses to live in more modest surroundings, the fact that he apparently takes the bus or the tram or took it just after his election, are these just cosmetic things, or do you sense that something fundamental is beginning to happen at the leadership level?
He personally does represent something completely new in the Vatican, a much humbler, more simple attitude towards leading the Catholic Church than traditional popes of the past, and particularly Italian popes. However, the entrenched positions of the people who run the Vatican are so strong that I think he's going to have a lot of problems in trying to carry out the reforms for which he was apparently elected. One of the really interesting things was in the pre-conclave discussions in Rome earlier this year, how cardinals from all over the world were very, very critical of their church and about what's been going on in the Vatican. I think under Benedict things really got to a pretty pass, as one might say, and Benedict himself threw in the towel, as it were, because he felt that he didn't have the physical or intellectual strength to carry on. It was an unprecedented situation. So really it's an open question at the moment how far Francis is going to be able to carry out these promised reforms.
So, David Willey, with that very outboxing expression of throwing in the towel, and for those of us who believe in the power of prayer, we pray for Italy and we pray for the Vatican. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
That was the BBC Rome correspondent David Willey talking to Michael McKay.
That was the McKay Interview with Michael McKay. And don't forget, you can hear that interview again on our website, radiofrontier.ch.